Paladin is a really old English word from the time of Charlemagne, which he had these knights called paladins, and it's come to mean being a champion for a cause. I think we lose sight of often in the humdrum of legal practice that really, certainly through pro bono work, every single lawyer, every person with a law degree can be a champion for a cause and a champion for some important moment in somebody's life.
Today on LawNext, a conversation with Felicity Conrad, co-founder and CEO of Paladin, a company that is on a mission to help law firms, corporations, and others streamline their pro bono programs and help serve more clients in need. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. We'll get to today's interview in just a moment, but first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, on to this week's interview. Felicity Conrad, welcome to LawNext.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
I've followed the development of Paladin as we were just talking. You guys were in our startup, the first startup alley. We did a tech show 3 years ago when you were pretty much, what year did Paladin get started?
Around that time. That was very soon
2015
after.
or so, something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you were an associate at Skadden Arps when you got the idea for Paladin, as I understand it. How did you begin to think about this? What were you doing, and what inspired you to think about starting this company?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So my background is originally kind of public interest, but on the more international side. I worked at the United Nations on international criminal court issues. So that's genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. But after law school, I moved into the private sector. And that was at Skadden Arps, as you mentioned. But when I think about kind of my time there and the inspiration for Paladin, it was really the pro bono work that I did while I was there. And I represented a man who was fleeing violence in Colombia. He'd been a local politician, and a narco-terrorist organization had tried to kill him. And he fled within Colombia. They found him, and then he came to the United States. And when he came across my desk as a first-year associate at Skadden, he was being deported and was afraid that he might die. So I took on his case, went to immigration court, learned as best as I could to be a pro bono lawyer in that case, and was able to win asylum for him and his family. And that was by far my most kind of profound professional experience at that time. I got really excited about the idea of private sector lawyers. Most of my class from NYU Law had gone into the private sector. Most lawyers do these days. Mm-hmm. And pro bono has really kind of flourished as this way for private sector lawyers to get involved, to have an impact. But to your point, the idea for Paladin really came from the fact that I didn't feel as a lawyer that it was as easy as it could have been to get involved, to find the right case. I actually kind of had to be proactive, and I looked across the hall at some of my colleagues, and not everyone is being proactive. And I think that when we look at access to justice, the level of crisis that we're in, it's really important to engage the private sector. So Paladin was kind of born out of that idea of how do we create tools to engage the private sector in pro bono work, a lot of the work that they already really want to do, more efficiently and effectively.
What was your experience? I mean, before Paladin, how was it that, say, lawyers at Skadden were engaging in pro bono opportunities?
In the last 5 and 10 years, pro bono programs, departments, personnel have really flourished as an entire profession, which is really cool. Yeah. So most major law firms have full-time pro bono partners, departments. Now corporate legal teams have full-on pro bono programs for their corporate in-house lawyers. You see this at law schools. In New York, pro bono is now mandatory for law students wanting to pass the bar. So there isn't a shortage of kind of interest in infrastructure in pro bono, but what there is a shortage of kind of tech to facilitate that work. So when you see these kind of huge pro bono programs at major law firms, corporations, they're really being run behind the scenes off of like emails, spreadsheets, phone calls at best. And we saw this across law firms, corporates, and also legal service organizations. And that's a huge issue because they're spending time on administrative work and kind of hand placing cases that could be spent actually representing clients.
Yeah. So how did you go? I mean, we were just talking, we're here at Suffolk, we were on a panel together a few moments ago. We were talking about the fact that you really didn't have a tech background. How did you go from associate at Skadden to CEO of a tech company?
A little haphazardly, to be perfectly honest. But I think that's the cool thing about legal tech right now is that there aren't a huge number of folks working on it. There's a lot of open spaces. And so there's an opportunity for folks to kind of come in, learn, and over an arc of time, actually create valuable things. So for me, I kind of had the subject matter expert standpoint from the point of view as a lawyer, not a pro bono professional. But we were able to form a team pretty quickly. My co-founder, Kristen Sonday, his background is both in legal and scaling companies. Our CTO, we brought on a creative director and really kind of created a team that had the skills to really look at this problem and kind of co-create with our co-development partners, design thinking, throw in all the buzzwords here, a solution that might work.
Yeah. Did you just leave Skadden cold turkey and embark on this, or were you kind of doing it in your spare time for a while and making the transition?
A little bit of both. I think there's an important moment that arises, and I actually remember I had coffee with somebody, and he said if I was actually serious about doing this, I had to quit my job, and he wouldn't believe me until I did. So it made the rest of the coffee meeting really awkward.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a moment where I said, okay, am I serious about this? If so, like you can try to build the airplane and fly the airplane when you've thrown yourself off a cliff. That's necessity breeds invention, right?
Yeah.
So I did. Several weeks, maybe a month afterwards, I marched into my managing partner's office and told him that I was starting a pro bono software company.
Yeah. Well, I'll admit to having watched a few episodes of Shark Tank in my time, and that sounds like something one of the sharks would say. And not coincidentally, I guess you have Mark Cuban as an investor in your company, who of course is a host of that. Was it Mark Cuban who told you that? Because I've heard him say that on that show. They'll say to CEOs, if you're really serious about this, you need to quit your day job and work on this.
Oh, that's interesting. It wasn't, but it very well could have been. And had I known Mark when I was thinking about this, I'm sure he would have given us that advice.
Yeah.
No, but Mark, I mean, like kind of the person I had coffee with, there really does need to be a level of commitment to working on these issues. And it's really difficult because funding is difficult, finding teams is difficult, finding partners, stakeholders. It's really challenging to build access to justice tech. But I think that what really is called for right now is people kind of standing up and saying, we're going to do it. We're going to figure out how together. Yeah. But we're committed to kind of seeing this through. Yeah.
And I guess as part of that commitment, you've organized as a benefit corporation.
Yes.
Which means, I guess, I don't know legally exactly what that means, but it means you're committed to doing good things, essentially, that you're committed to putting good things ahead, maybe even of the interests of shareholders or something. Is that a fair way to put it? Or
yeah, I think so. Legally, they're called public benefit corporations, PBCs. And I think legally the distinction is that you are a for-profit company organized for the purpose of a social mission, and that shareholders kind of can hold you to both the impact and the revenue goals and can't sue you for kind of pursuing impact over revenue in certain cases. But more broadly, it was a difficult decision when we were organizing. I didn't see any examples of PBCs in the space. The legal designation wasn't created, I think, until 2014. But it kind of goes along the lines of what we're trying to do, build infrastructure bridging private sector legal the private sector of legal and the public interest justice gap. And it seemed the best way to do that was to actually couple that into our certificate of incorporation.
Yeah. So what are you trying to do? What are you building with Paladin? Tell me more about what Paladin does or what the idea of it is.
Yeah. So Paladin is building a global pro bono platform, and our mission is to make pro bono as seamless and streamlined as possible, with the ultimate goal of increasing access to justice. What that means in practice is that we've built a software product, and it's used by Fortune 500 legal teams, now law firms, longer-term bar associations, governments, and law schools, and also legal service organizations, creating infrastructure to support their pro bono programs internally, so workflow management, engaging their lawyers, managing the program, tracking the work being done, tracking outcomes, capturing stories, testimonials, but also facilitating the collaboration between those organizations. So the life cycle of a pro bono case often starts at a legal service organization who says, okay, this is a great case to refer it. They then send it to their pro bono panel. It might include a number of law firms. The law firms have processes internally to distribute that case to their lawyers. They might distribute it to their corporate partners. And there isn't really a system to facilitate that collaboration piece and then the network piece. So a lawyer at one law firm may not know that a lawyer at a different law firm actually took the case that they're looking at 2 days ago. So there's no kind of single source of truth in the pro bono space, and that's really one of the goals for what we're building.
So you're providing a feed for the opportunities into these organizations, in part.
Yeah. So the kind of referral and intake and engagement is the first kind of half of the pro bono life cycle. So from the legal service organization, the process of getting a lawyer who's really well suited for that case placed on that case as soon as possible is really the first part of Paladin software.
Are you engaging with organizations? I mean, you're going around to Greater Boston Legal Services and saying, if there's an opportunity, let us know about it. We'll list it. We'll get it out to firms and whatever. Is that sort of how it works, or
not directly? So we're not out there kind of soliciting, but the law firms we work with, the corporations we work with, they have long-standing relationships with their legal service partners.
So they already have those relationships.
Exactly, and so we're building kind of tools to facilitate those relationships. In some cases, folks are looking to increase their pool of pro bono partners, and that's something that we're interested in. But really it is when a law firm comes on board using Paladin, they automatically, their pro bono partners get tools, free tools to help them manage and refer their pro bono cases. But
then they can also know where those cases that need a pro bono lawyer stand. I mean,
yes.
That asylum case that comes in and they need somebody right away, is that in some way through your platform being communicated to multiple customers of yours, if you call them customers? I mean, to
yes.
different people who are all on the platform?
Yeah. So if the legal service organization has an urgent case they want to refer, that can get referred to whichever law firm or corporation they want it to be, and it happens in real time. So as soon as the pro bono coordinator sees it, it's automatically in the system. It can automatically go through the lawyers. It's browsable kind of as soon as the legal service organization clicks a button. It's not sitting in the inbox of the pro bono coordinator because they're in a meeting. And the lawyers who receive it are receiving it because it's in line with their preferences. So they've expressed an interest in immigration, in family. So it will be stack ranked according to that. So the goal is to really surface to lawyers the sorts of pro bono cases that they're a good match for and streamline the process on all sides. And obviously the goal of doing that, it's great to streamline things, but the goal is to actually ultimately increase engagement and the number of clients being served, which so far we've been really successful at.
And are the firms and legal departments and other organizations that are using your platform paying you some kind of a subscription or licensing fee for using it?
Yes, the private bar organizations do, and that subsidizes free referral tools on the legal service side. So our model is a pretty standard kind of SaaS model that law firms pay, and they use our software to manage their pro bono programs. On the business side, the goals there are to increase their engagement, which is often a goal internally within those organizations, to decrease the administrative costs of running their programs, and to capture data and stories which they can use in their recruitment materials. Now we hear like 90% of millennials make job decisions based on whether their employer is committed to CSR, corporate social responsibility. So pro bono plays a really important part in recruitment, retention, branding, all of those kind of soft sides of the business, which actually are really important parts of the business.
We'll get back to my interview in just a moment, but first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, let's continue this week's interview. I know that you've entered into, I guess you call them co-development arrangements with, I think, some law firms, Dentons, Wilson, Sonsini, I think, are a couple. What does that mean? When you're co-developing with a law firm, are you just working to make the platform work kind of within the system they've already got in place for handling pro bono within their firm, or does it mean something more than that?
I think, so co-development has definitely been a word thrown around a lot in legal tech recently, and it can probably mean whatever you want it to mean.
Yeah.
For
what
us,
does it mean for you?
For us, it means that we have been working really closely with a cohort of law firms, of which Dentons and Wilson Sonsini were some of the first, and legal service organizations, corporations, and they've worked really closely with us. Yeah, exactly. To the Chicago Bar Foundation, which has been an incredible partner.
Which is a very innovative bar foundation to begin with.
Yeah, they're fantastic. But working really closely with them, not to create custom to solutions, which I think co-development can sometimes mean, but to create a product that incorporates their expertise as the subject matter experts. So Ben Weinberg at Dentons is the pro bono partner there, and he's worked really closely with us to co-develop a product that he thinks will work for him and other law firms who have robust pro bono programs. So it's not custom, but it is really influenced by our co-development partners' expertise.
I know your co-founder, Kristen Sonday, I've talked to her in the past about, she's done, I know she's done it multiple times now, but she did at least one significant study about the fact that women and people of color are very underrepresented in the legal tech space. I'm just wondering what your experience has been like as a woman CEO in the legal tech space. Have you found that there have been obstacles that you faced as a woman that perhaps you might not have if you were a man?
I'm sure, 100%. I think that the numbers kind of speak for themselves, and Kristen's study found, I think, that diversity is lower in legal tech than in legal or tech separately. Right. Yeah. And that reflects kind of female founders, women of color. But I think specifically with respect to access to justice, the point that she was making was that the access to justice gap disproportionately affects women, minorities, and immigrants. And so if those are the populations that your technology and solutions are looking to serve, it's pretty absurd that they're not a part of the building process. Mm-hmm. So I think that as an industry and as an ecosystem, we have to take a pretty hard look at ourselves and what the barriers to entry are. How can we be more inclusive? And if we aren't ourselves diverse, how can we at the very least in our design, validation, research process ensure that we're working really closely with the ultimate users of the products that we're building? Yeah,
of course, not all legal technology products are being built to address the access to justice
crisis. As a matter of fact, I think overall that's the minority out there, and not the majority.
A scant minority, yes.
A scant minority, but it's sort of. And I'm cognizant of our time here because I know it's racing by quickly. But I did want to get your thoughts a little bit more broadly about how the role of pro bono in addressing the access to justice crisis, and what thoughts you have more about how technology can be used to, in a broader scale beyond just Paladin, to be addressing the access to justice issue in this country.
Well, that is not a small question.
No, it's not a small question. It's a big question with a few minutes left to answer it.
I think that one of the really interesting things is that access to justice tech is finally starting to hit what feels like a stride. Maybe it's not a tipping point yet, but for the first time ever, organizations like Paladin, and Paladin is not the only one, and we're addressing a particular piece of the puzzle. Organizations like us who are focused on single issue infrastructure are starting to emerge. And so one of the big concerns and questions in A2J tech historically has been sustainability and scalability. How do you make sure that projects aren't siloed and they aren't short-term? How do you create accountability long-term, share data, and integrate with each other and really be truly collaborative? So the fact that there are other organizations focused specifically on scaling certain subject matters, and Community Lawyer, Good Call, Blue Ridge Labs from the Robin Hood Foundation has been a great incubator for these sorts of companies and projects, but they're really happening even across law schools. Those are really exciting opportunities for us to align incentives, create real collaboration, create real data sharing, and frankly, be honest about what did we do that worked? What did we do that didn't work? What are the real numbers on a number of clients being served? What do the outcomes look like? Really excited by some of these kind of data commons and repository initiatives that are taking place. But I think more broadly, like, this is an absolutely enormous issue. It isn't a winners take all opportunity. It's a moment for us to all kind of lower the gates. Our theme for the quarter is actually open the gates, and really start working together. So that's a bit of a maybe like a silly answer because it's so obvious, but
well, I'm not sure it is all that obvious to everybody. I mean, I think it's a great answer, and I mean, what you're saying is different than I think a lot of technology companies often think, which is that they think about their product and they think about the space, the silo that they're in, and the space that they operate in.
Defensibility and barriers to entry. Yeah. I don't think it does any of us a service in this particular space to be operating from that mindset. Yeah, I mean,
it sounds like you're saying that Paladin is part of a greater collaborative community effort to address a big problem. You're one part of it, but you're not all of the answer. What does the name Paladin come from?
Well, now I almost avoided outing myself as a nerd on this podcast, but alas, Paladin is a really old English word from the time of Charlemagne, which he had these knights called paladins, and it's come to mean being a champion for a cause. And I think that that's really important, certainly in this moment in time, but also within the legal profession. I think we lose sight of often in the humdrum of legal practice that really, certainly through pro bono work, every single lawyer, every person with a law degree can be a champion for a cause and a champion for some important moment in somebody's life. So our goal is to kind of bring together infrastructure and hopefully some reminders that at the end of the day, that does really matter.
Felicity, anything you'd like to add before we conclude here?
Do pro bono. Yeah, and I think on the collaboration front, if there are folks interested in having conversations about this, we're on Twitter, join Paladin. We are really, really open to chatting with folks and collaborating.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to be with me today. Enjoyed talking to you.
My thanks to Felicity Conrad for taking the time to sit down with us today. Thanks also to the sponsors who keep this show running. MyCase, with thousands of customers, is a trusted practice management solution helping lawyers across the country run organized, efficient, and successful law firms. You can try MyCase free today at mycase.com. And HeadNote, a proud sponsor of LawNext and proud to power compliant payments for the legal industry. Visit headnote.com to register for a free account and get $20 in transaction fee credits to try HeadNote totally risk-free. Last but not least, thanks to Ben Ambrogi for producing and editing the show. That's it for this week. This is Bob Ambrogi.